much for joining us today. I am Honor. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Honor Way Marketing and have been working with Zambian Ground Handlers for many years now. I couldn't even tell you how long, but here I am today with Nick Aslin from Zambian Ground Handlers. We are celebrating 15 years of Zambian Ground Handlers this year, which is super exciting. And of course, I'm here with Danny as well, who looks after all the marketing for Zambian Ground Handlers. So I thought it would be a nice idea to put together this webinar so we can have a good chat, catch up on all things Zambia with Nick and Danny. It's a big year for Zambia because we're celebrating 60 years of independence in October. And as I just mentioned, we're celebrating 15 years of Zambian Ground Handlers. We've got quite a mixed audience today. So what I thought would be interesting is to sort of set the scene with a bit of a roundup summary presentation on Zambia. We're going to look at the sort of USPs, we're going to look at the seasons, and then we'll just do a recap of the parks. If anyone obviously wanted more in-depth training, you can get in touch with us and we can organise that at another stage. But hopefully today will still be very helpful. We're then going to chat a little bit about what's new in Zambia this year. We're going to chat about the Zambian educational trip, which Zambian Ground Handlers are organising for October time, which will be in sort of celebration of Zambian Ground Handlers, Zambia, and of course promoting tourism. We're also going to chat to a couple of the team because we're obviously always working hard to stay on top of our knowledge of places in Zambia, visiting places. So we're going to chat to Nick and Danny, as well as William and Noisisi about recent visits. And then we are basically going to have a bit of an informal chat listening to all your questions. So just some admin to start with. As you know, questions please in the Q&A box. Sorry about the chat being disabled. I did try to sort that out. But anyway, one place, easy. We will be following up with a recording to this webinar and some general information, things like that. And of course, if you're interested in the Zambian educational trip, you can always let us know, either again by emailing myself or Danny. And then we will chat a little bit more about the celebrations later on and throughout the year. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Danny, who is going to kick off with a roundup on Zambia, just to give us a bit of a setting of the scene. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks, On. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for everyone for tuning in today. Just a quick overview of Zambia, where it's located on the map, in case some of you don't actually know. It's in Southern Africa. We're a landlocked country, and flights and access into the country is very, very easy. I will share a slide on that shortly. Here are 6 reasons to visit Zambia and our USPs. A few of them are, we have a wide variety of Africa's finest safari accommodation. It is home of the Victoria Falls and Livingston Island, where you can do the Devil's Pool swim. And what's quite unique about Zambia is 30% of our land is protected, and we have 20 national parks. None of the parks in Zambia are fenced, so it's quite nice that animals can roam freely between the GMA and the park itself. Zambia has also been consistently voted one of Africa's safest countries to visit, which is definitely a huge plus for travelers. And there's also a rich culture and heritage in the country itself. Nosisi actually went last weekend to the Inkwala Festival in Jakarta, and she absolutely loved it. And there's also a great dog and cat population in Zambia. I spoke to Zambian Carnival program a few months ago, and I'd asked them how the dogs were doing. And they said in the Luangwa Valley, there's over 350 dogs estimated in the valley alone. And that's actually more than Kruger National Park at the moment, which is fantastic for the Luangwa Valley. Flights and logistics into Zambia. So coming in, it's very, very easily accessible. There's daily flights from Qatar and Emirates, and also connections are really, really easy. For example, if you land at 8:30 with Qatar Airways, there's usually a flight going to Mfui at 10 o'clock. And if you land at 2 o'clock with Emirates, there's normally a flight going at 4 o'clock to Mfui. So it really fits in well with the circuit in Zambia. Seasons in Zambia. So Zambia is a very seasonal country. A lot of the remote bush camps do close when the rains start, but I will be touching on what makes every month special in Zambia. So starting with January to March, January to March is our peak rainy season, but the bush is very lush and green. A lot of young animals start emerging during the season, like the impalas drop their young, but a lot of the majority bush camps are closed. But having said that, there are quite a few camps that still are open. And Robin Pope Safaris does have their river journey special, which is between Nkwali and Nsefu, and that runs until the 31st of March. April to June is the start of our dry season, but the bush is still green and the game viewing has improved from the previous months as the bush starts thickening out, becoming less thick. From May onwards, most of the camps do open, but it is the best time to view the falls in June. The spray is amazing and you get that beautiful 360 view of the falls itself. July to October is our peak season, but there's absolutely amazing game viewing during this time. In some of the lodges, you actually don't have to leave your lodge to have great sightings. For example, I was staying at one of the camps in the South Luangwa at Lion Camp, and we were sitting on the deck and we watched a lion kill a baby hippo. Well, had killed a baby hippo. So, I mean, it's quite amazing just the game from the deck itself. July to August, there's pleasant weather with chillier nights. And September to October, it's more dry, hot days, but warm nights. It does get very, very warm in October, but the game viewing during that time is phenomenal. From September to October, the falls do start drying up as well. If you can see this picture is taken in the drier season where the falls over here towards the end do become a little bit more drier on the Zambian side. From November to December, this is the closing of seasons for majority of the camps, well, majority of the remote bush camps, but there's very impressive early season storms. And it's also when the bat migration in Kasanka starts. So for those that are not familiar about the bat migration, it's actually the biggest mammal migration on Earth. So about 10 million fruit bats come into Kasanka, and it's quite a spectacle to go and see. Also in December, the Mfui elephants start to walk through the reception, and it's a really great month for birding. Now I'm going to pass over to Nick, who's going to just briefly touch on all of the parks.
Thank you all. So we're just going to whiz through a couple of the more commonly visited national parks. As Danny said a moment or two ago, we have 20 national parks in Zambia. The primary ones we're going to look at today, we'll start with the South Luangwa in the east of the country, probably the country's premier wildlife destination, although the operators in the Lower Zambezi think they've got something to say about that. But there's a greater variety of camps in the South Luangwa than any of the other parks. So that's where we're going to start. There are a couple of endemic species there. It is a very special place for wildlife. So the Thornycroft giraffe and the Cookson's wildebeest are found nowhere else. And the Thornycroft giraffe actually was the species that the park was established as a nature reserve back in the early 1900s in order to protect that particular subspecies of giraffe. So for those keen on mammals, those two endemic species are very special. We'll talk about the wider variety in the Kafue later on, but for the moment we're sticking with the Luangwa. And I always like to put in a little bit about the Luangwa River itself and the fact that the valley has a shallow gradient from where the Luangwa rises in the border between Malawi and Tanzania and Zambia, until it gets down to the confluence with the Zambezi. So it's a shallow gradient, which means that the river meanders. It wanders across the valley floor, creating these oxbow lagoons as the river takes the more direct route down the valley. The old loop or the old corner of the river is cut off, creating an oxbow lagoon. The reason that I go on about this is the fact that this is what creates such a high carrying capacity in the Luangwa. The alluvium deposits that the river slowly lays down across the valley floor create a very rich, fertile environment. Great variety of different vegetation types on the riparian belt, which is the kilometre or so on either side of the Luangwa River. And that gives rise to a very high carrying capacity. So in very simple terms, that means that a lot of animals can live close to the river, and that is why the Luangwa is such a special place and such a wonderful place to go to view big African game. What makes the South Luangwa unique? I'm not going to read them all out, but I'll just waffle on a little bit, and you can read those for yourself. But yeah, bird species, huge number of birds, and the wildlife, as I've just explained, there is a very great carrying capacity. So it is home to an awful lot of fauna and flora. So yeah, to be on safari, it's a wonderful place to be. Norman Carr, I was lucky enough to work with him in the 90s. He was one of the founding fathers of safaris in the Luangwa, and we've got a lot to thank him for. So yeah, really the Luangwa country's premier wildlife destination, I think. And moving on, walking safaris, yeah, the different activities. We'll talk more about activities in the Lower Zambezi, which has a greater variety. But in the Luangwa, regarded as the home of the walking safari, we will walk in all the different parks in Zambia, and the way that we walk is slightly different to most countries. We do our game viewing on foot when we go out on foot on a walking safari. So it's led by an armed escort scout, and then the safari guide comes behind him. So different to other destinations that might just choose to take people out on foot to look at the smaller things. We actually try and track big game and get up close and personal to it. Beautiful shot. They're very, very typical Luangwa shot in sort of September, August. These carmine beaters start to come, and through September they're nesting in the riverbanks in huge numbers. So that's again a very typical late dry season scene in the Luangwa. And a couple of different sleep out options. You can sleep out under the stars in several national parks, but yeah, the Luangwa, there's a couple of companies that will take people out and camp out under the stars. There's also a few options of camps that have star beds attached to the room, so giving people the opportunity to sleep inside the room or outside. Puku Ridge being a good example of that. Kafue Safaris also have star beds in one of their bush camps, so that's quite a nice feature. And that's a very pretty picture of a sunset in the Kapamba River, I think. So another very typical Luangwa shot. This is end of the dry season when large herds of buffalo will congregate, and they're never too far away from what little surface water remains at the end of the dry season. So moving on to the Lower Zambezi, it's quite a different style of park to the Luangwa. It is just back upstream on the Zambezi from where the Luangwa comes in and its confluence. It's a much smaller national park than the Luangwa, and if you move on, I'm sure the next slide is a picture of the river. No, we don't have one of the river, but the river is a very different style of river to the Luangwa. It's been dammed in several places along its course, and so it is the flow of the water is controlled most close upstream by the Kafue Dam the Kariba Dam that creates Lake Kariba, and so there's lots of islands and grass and palm islands in the middle of the river, and a relatively small amount of flat land between the hills that form the escarpment of the Zambezi Valley and the river itself. So that's where the game viewing is conducted. The difference also between the Lower Zambezi and the Luangwa is the variety of activities, because the river is navigable year round. So a lot of time is spent on the water, either in canoes or boats or fishing, all sorts of different activities, both land and water based. That was a shot I was expecting a minute or two ago. That explains what I was saying. The islands in the middle of the river, and then a relatively narrow band of flat land between the river and the escarpment hills, and that's where all the game viewing is done and where the camps are located. Most of the camps in this park are located on the river itself, and as I was saying, plenty of activities, water based as well as land. The Kafue, we talked about the variety and number of animals in the South Luangwa. The Kafue has the largest variety of species of any of the parks in Zambia, or indeed most of the parks in Africa. It is very special for the variety of species, and it's a place that you will see animals such as roan and sable, even cheetah, that you're unlikely to spot in other destinations around Zambia. Not impossible, but the Kafue is the sort of place that you will expect to see certain species that you wouldn't have found in the other parks. It's a very large national park, divided into a few areas. The central area is quite key with several camps, and then there's the Busanga Plains in the north of the Kafue, and the 3 or 4 operators have camps up there in right in the northern part. But it is a very seasonal area, the Busanga Plains. June, it's almost entirely covered in water. So there's a couple of camps that open in June, but it is hard work in June. So July, August, September, October, really only a 4-month proper season in the Busanga Plains. And as I say, roan and sable found all over the park, and good opportunities to see cheetah as well. Lion, this is taken on the Busanga Plains. Lion not uncommon in any of the parks in Zambia, but cheetah are a little bit harder to come by. So it's quite nice to have a look around for those. Livingston, 12-month destination in Livingston. Danny mentioned a little bit about the flow of water over the falls. It does come and go. It's not so much the rainy season. The peak flow of water over the falls comes after the rains have finished. Actually, all the water. This map here shows the Zambezi River coming down the eastern side, the western side of Zambia, and there's huge floodplains on both sides of the river that extend for many miles, and that water slowly seeps into the river, and it's not until June time, when the rains are well behind us, that the peak flow of water is going over the falls. Various different accommodation options in Livingston. You've got larger hotels close to the falls and town itself, and then the sort of private, fully inclusive camps tend to be further upstream. And those, we place people in all sorts of different styles of accommodation in Livingston, but I think that the private, fully inclusive camps are a little bit more in tune with the style of safari camps that most of our clients and your clients would have stayed in other parts of the country. So just a brief touch on the other areas that are often included in itineraries around Zambia. Danny mentioned briefly the bat migration in November, which takes place in Kasanka National Park. The Bangwelu wetlands, a little bit north of Kasanka, is home to the shoebill. There's one camp up there that we use, Shoebill Camp. Wonderful destination for those keen on birding. You punt around a wetland marshy area looking for shoebill and a plethora of other aquatic birds as well. And then all the way over in the west of the country, the Luwa Plains National Park. There's a couple of camps there. There's King Luwanika that was operated by Time and Tide. There's a little bit of a change in the helm of that camp, and more news will emerge about who will be operating King Luwanika in the weeks to come. And then there's another new camp that's been opened by Africa Parks, who are in charge of operating that particular national park, along with the Kafue as well, more recently. So a couple of camps in Luwa Plain. And that pretty much sums up the most popular safari destinations that I would suggest that 80 or 90% of what we put together in terms of trips is accounted for in the Luangwa, the Kafue, and the Lower Zambezi and Livingston, with those other areas less frequently visited. A little bit about what's new in Zambia this year. I think Anna wanted to touch on a couple of subjects. Flights, there's new scheduled flights into the Kafue National Park. The access to that park gets easier and easier each year as more camps are established, and the Kafue is becoming a more sought after destination. So there's new scheduled flights, and there are a couple of new routes within the Kafue National Park as well. So access to that park is getting easier. In terms of new camps this year, there's not so much on the horizon. There's the rebuilding of Chicheli Lodge, Chicheli Presidential Lodge in the South Luangwa, which will be a sister camp to Puku Ridge, which is operated by Chiawa Safaris. So the teams are rebuilding Chicheli Lodge, and we're hoping that will have a soft opening at the end of this year. So that's a new camp. I don't think there's too many other new camps, apart from the one I just mentioned in Liwa Plain. Lusaka to Cape Town is another relatively new route. It actually came out last year, but worthy of mention. Cape Town, obviously a very popular destination, and the abilities to combine that with a trip around Zambia are becoming more numerous as we move on. And visas. It is no longer, as of January the 1st this year, it's no longer necessary to have a visa for most guests that come to visit Zambia. So that's not brand new, but it is always worthy of mention that visa-free travel these days is always very popular. I think that's probably about it, unless anyone else has got anything to throw in that I've forgotten.
No, I think the one thing that there was chat about the rhinos also from African parks into the Kafue, or is that something to watch this space?
Yeah, no, it's I was talking to African Parks just a couple of days ago about it and asking whether we're allowed to talk about it, and they are keen for us to talk about it. It's
a good thing
news,
then.
yeah. So no, we're allowed to talk about that. They're going to be bringing in somewhere in the region of 150 black rhino into an area just north of the central part of the Kafue National Park, and that introduction should start later this year, I believe. So yeah, that is quite exciting.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both, Nick and Danny, very, very much. That was super interesting. Before we go on to questions, what I'd love to do is we chatted about the team, you know, their knowledge. They have, I can't remember what it is. It's a combined knowledge of many, many years. But more importantly, they're always sort of out and about on the ground, visiting places. And actually, you mentioned that Noisizi went to the Nkwala Festival recently. So when we chat to Noisizi, not only would I like to hear about her recent family visit to Chundukwa and Waterbury in Livingston, it would also be nice to hear a little bit about that festival. So we're going to hear from Noisizi first, and then William, and then a little bit from Danny and Nick about places they've visited. So welcome, Noisizi. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's nice to see more of the team members. So some people who are on the webinar today, you will be working with. So it's nice for you to them to see you really, because you can't see them, of course. But I'd love to hear about.
I wish I could though.
Pardon me?
I wish I could though.
I know. So you've recently been in Livingston. Would you mind telling us a little bit? You took your children, so it's lovely also to hear from a family point of view why, you know, what was special about it, why you enjoyed it, and more importantly, how they enjoyed it.
So basically, I think my kids are always interested in everything that I'm doing, and we love to travel quite a bit. So Livingston was the destination this time around. And so we stayed at Waterbury for 2 nights, and then stayed at Chundukwa for another 2 nights. Both very different experiences. Obviously, Waterbury is slightly bigger than Chundukwa, which is, I think both are very intimate, but Waterbury is slightly bigger in terms of space and the number of rooms available, whilst Chundukwa sort of has, let's say, 6 rooms in total. So the best part about staying at Chundukwa was the fact that you have the owners on camp, and Gail and Doug went all out and made sure that my kids had activities planned. They had food mainly prepared for them. And so that was nice to actually have a touch there, because that made our stay memorable at Chundukwa. The same was, the experience was equally beautiful at Waterbury. The team went all out as well. Great food, beautiful manicured gardens. The rooms are very colorful. So that I think overall, even for families, made our place, our stay even more pleasant. So yeah, had a great experience with the kids.
And what kind of activities did you do together? Did you do all the typical river waterfalls?
So we did, I think the first day we arrived at Waterbury, we had a boat safari. So we went on a sunset cruise. That was really nice. We had some sundowners there. We did fishing as well, both at Waterbury and Chundukwa. And I think the highlight for the kids was the horse riding. So we went horse riding on one afternoon, and then very early in the morning before we actually departed, Gail had the kids sort of go in the morning to interact with the horses, feed them, sort of like groom them and stuff like that. So that was a really memorable experience, to be honest. So yeah.
Brilliant. So both very good mid-market options for that area, and located on the river, which of course is super exciting.
Yes, which was good. Yes.
And well, thank you, Noisizi. Just on the festival side, do you mind just giving us a really quick little overview of the festival? Because obviously culture is huge. Everyone's interested in it. So if you don't mind just giving us a really quick overview, we won't keep you too long.
No, okay. So basically, I've always wondered who I am. And basically, this was me trying to go find out part of myself. My grandma was Zulu, and so for me this ceremony was important for me to attend, because at least it gave me some sort of sense of groundedness and stuff like that. So yes, I did go. The ceremony was between the 23rd and the 23rd of February, last weekend. The main event actually happened on the 24th. It was exciting to see different people from different countries. That's Malawi, from Mozambique, South Africa, just congregate, because it's a huge spectacle. It's a huge event that brings together different countries, but celebrating one event, which was the Nchwala ceremony of the Ngoni people. So that was an eventful experience as well, just seeing how many people sort of congregate and come to support each other for such a colorful event.
Brilliant. There's some amazing festivals in Zambia, so maybe one day we'll have to write a little bit about them so that we can learn more. But thanks, Noisizi, that's amazing.
Also, just so, you're calling it a festival, and I'm just aware that there'll be some people tuned in that think Noisizi spent her weekend at a music festival.
No,
Not
you're
the case
right.
at all. It was a
Cultural
traditional
festival.
ceremony. Traditional ceremony, so it's quite different from
cultural
what other people might think of
traditional
as
ceremony.
a festival.
Yes, I know. Sorry, that's a very good
That's
point.
right.
We'll call it a cultural traditional ceremony, but it would be nice. There are some very interesting ones in Zambia. So one day we'll have to explore them in a little bit more detail, because that's really interesting to hear. So thank you, Noisizi, and thank you, Nick. Shall we pass over to William, who is going to chat to us about a recent experience doing the mobile walking safaris with RPS, please? Love to hear a bit more there.
I was privileged actually last year in end of September to accompany a walking safari arranged by Robin Pop Safaris. It was really an amazing experience for me because I had never done it before. You know, I've grown in the bush pretty much my whole life. I've been in the traditional walking camps, but the RPS, they call it the Mpamazi walking safaris. It is roughly about 80 to 82 kilometers away from the Luangwa River, further inland. I mean, it's a beautiful experience. Activities there were typically walking and nothing motorized at all. You know, so you stay from camp 1, walk to the next camp, and then finish off depending on how you walk, either on camp 3 or camp 4. I had an amazing experience last September, to say the least. It was beautiful. You know, sleeping in that camp, I mean, in the tent, the first night, we could hear this male lion roaring from far away, and it was slowly and walking towards the camp. You know, it is a flimsy tent. And you know what? What really made my adrenaline pump was the toilets are outside. Basically, it's a long drop, and the bucket showers. You can't go outside because there's a lion roaring. I mean, it was an amazing experience. I enjoyed every moment of it.
How many nights did you do, William?
We did 2 nights. It was a mini mobile. We
It was a
basically
taster.
was to give us an experience of it. Usually, a normal mobile walking safaris would be either 5 to 7 nights.
Okay, so you did 2 locations in those 2 nights to get the idea of sort of one location and walking to the next to a new camp setup.
That's right. So basically, we drove on the first day. I mean, we drove from Kwali to the first satellite camp, which they pitched. What we did there was we had a picnic lunch and then drove to our first camp where we stayed, which is Camp 2.
Okay.
And on the second night, we walked past Camp 3 and stayed at Camp 4. So
Okay,
we had
you
an
got a good-
experience of seeing exactly.
In fast forward, but you got a really nice taster.
Oh, yes. I mean, it reminded me, meeting and listening to Norman many years ago. That's the experience. I mean, basically the origins of walking safaris.
Yeah, very true.
Because you walk from the first camp, they demolish everything, and then you walk to the next camp. You find they've pitched it up already. Beautiful.
And what kind of clients do you think it would suit?
That's a very good question, Ona. It's not for everybody. I mean, you don't need people with wobbly knees. I mean, they won't enjoy the experience because it is typically walking, no motorized activities. And for those that love their luxuries, bucket showers and long drops might not be a thing for them. So those that want to be very close to nature, I mean, they'll really enjoy it. And
you're cooking very lovely dinners over fires. It's all quite hands-on, or as hands-off as you want, really, isn't it?
The baking and the cooking of the foods, man, they dig the ovens, and then they use wood. Unbelievable. I mean, what comes out of those kitchens, man? Oh,
some of the best bread.
The best. I would say the best bread, yes.
Well, it sounds like it certainly left a very lasting memory on you, so that's fantastic.
I'll never forget it. I mean, I've been on many outings in the bush. Like I say, I'm a bushman, but that was a beautiful experience for me.
Thank you, William.
Pleasure.
Moving to Danny. Danny had the privilege of going to Royal Zambezi this year in February. Dan, would you mind telling us a little bit about that? Because it's the only camp that's open at this time of year. And obviously it's sort of the lower season for Zambia. So it'll be nice to hear about your experience, but more importantly, also what it was like in February for people that might be interested in the future.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It was very hot, especially for this time of year. So it's a little bit bizarre, but that's just because we are in a little bit of a drought at the moment. But the game was still very, very good. There was a lot of elephants around. At the moment, this time of year, if you have someone that's a keen fisherman, there is a fishing ban in Zambia. So all fishing is done inside of the park, strictly catch and release. But to be fair, all fishing is catch and release anyways. But the fishing was still very good inside of the park. Shane, my husband that came with me, he caught a 16-pound tiger. So he was very chuffed with that.
I imagine. Successful weekend.
Yeah, no, he got quite cross because I was the only one catching fish, so he had to outdo me with the bigger fish.
Of course, absolutely.
But it's quite different when you are in the park itself because there's no one there. So when you're doing game drives, you actually are the only people in the park because all the other camps are closed at the moment. So that's quite a unique experience.
I mean, it's obviously a much thicker bush. What did you see? You saw the usual lots of elephants. Did you see lots of buffalo around the water as you would in October? What about cats and dogs?
Unfortunately, I didn't see the dogs, but the couple that went on the game drive before me the day before, they saw the dogs. And they also saw the lions, which I just missed. But we did see buffalo. We did see a lot of zebra. and a lot of illies and a lot of little young impalas and young warthogs and a lot of babies around, which was cute, and a lot of birds, which was great.
And so you would take the boat from Royal and then they would have a vehicle ready for you to go driving in the park. And if there had been more rain, how does that kind of work? Did they tell you or give you an idea of that?
So do you mean getting into the park? Or...
Well, yeah, driving, because obviously there's a lot of cotton soil, isn't there? Which is why a lot of the camps are closed. But they have decided to stay open all year. So I just wanted to sort of showcase how worth it is really, whether you think it's great.
Well, I think it also depends on the rain. So they do a lot of game drives in the GMA sector as well. They've got a beautiful waterhole, which they've got a hide situated there. So that's quite nice right behind Royal. They've also, for game drives going into the park, because the Chongwe River is too full to cross at the moment, they do a boat to the park gate. There's a water park gate and a land park gate. So it's the water park gate on the river. Then you go up, sign in, and then they've got vehicles stationed there and they do the game drives in that sector there.
Brilliant. Well, that's really interesting. Thank you. So you had a lovely anniversary weekend there, and you definitely recommend it for those people kind of coming out in February, as we chatted about the skies, the storms, the scenery, the birding. It's all quite interesting at this time of year, isn't it?
No, it definitely is. It definitely is. And this year is a little bit different just because there hasn't been that much rain. So there is a little bit more wildlife around the river than there normally is this time of year.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Danny. That's really interesting to hear. And then Nick, you had a visit to Lolobezi in the latter end of last year. How was that?
I had some friends come out and stay with my wife and I in October. October, as we touched on earlier, is about the warmest month in the year. So I thought I would pick a camp that was going to mollycoddle me and cover me in air-conditioned splendor. So I chose Lolobezi, which is very nice. It's a very high-end camp. Quite a different feel at Lolobezi to the more typically Zambian and more rustic camps. It's a fairly new camp operated by African Bush Camps, and as I say, very comfortable, very luxurious, and yeah, place I figured would be pretty good for an October weekend, which can be quite warm. So William can have his long drops and his bucket showers on the Mufamazi River. I enjoyed my air conditioning and cold gin and tonic.
Yes,
but,
you've got
great.
total contrasts.
Yeah, complete contrast, but you can get that across a trip through Zambia these days. You really can. All of it excellent quality, but you can pick and choose the style of accommodation experience that you're looking for.
And I think that is, really lovely in Zambia that you have still got those very authentic bush camps of old, but it has obviously developed to such an extent where you have got more luxury choices in the various parks, which means there is something for everybody, but you can still enjoy that sort of authentic safari experience despite being in slightly more luxury.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you for those roundups. We will do more of that later in the year as the team are going to travel more. What I would love to know is just very quickly a favourite experience or place. Doesn't have to be a camp specifically, but I'd love to just throw out a couple of favourites from William, Danny, Noisisi, Nick. What really stands out for you? We chatted about more. There's quite a few sleep out options in Zambia, which I think is very cool. But Noisisi, what would be one of your up there experiences that you've had in your country, traveling around your country?
I think it would definitely be a sleep out under the stars. That's by far, I think, the best experience that I've had. I think I'm a very adventurous and spontaneous person, and so for me, just being out there in the air and experiencing the stars above and just the lovely views of the river, I think before the sun actually sets, is beautiful. And then waking up in the morning and seeing the sunrise right in your face, I think you can't trade that for anything. So
I
sleep
totally
out.
agree. Have you got a favorite one, or are you pretty fair to them all?
I think all sleep outs are different, and I think it's fair to say that each one is unique in its own way. But I enjoy the ones by the river mostly.
It definitely adds a special something. My favorite one was doing a sleep out on Livingston Island way back when. I got to sleep, and as you say, as the moon was setting, the sun was rising, so I had it on both sides. Danny, what would be one of your favorite experiences? I know you've had a fair few as well.
I've got quite a lot, but I think it was more like a moment. My mom and I were in the Lower Zambezi last year with Anabasi, and we went on a game drive, and there was 3 leopards in the tree. It was a mum, the sister, and the cub was jumping in between the two leopards. And underneath it, there was a very panoramic view of elephants. And it was just my mom and I watching it. There was no other person around there and the guide, but that was quite special. There was no one else there.
Sounds
There was
pretty
just
awesome.
for us.
Like the perfect frame.
It was such a beautiful frame. It was really, really amazing. And the leopard shape, the cub was very annoying to the older leopards.
Well, that's a love. And the joy is that you could just sit there and enjoy it. There's no rushing around. You just sit there and wait and see what happens, really.
No, it was amazing. We sat for about an hour until another vehicle came through. And then when the other vehicle came through, we thought, oh, we've had our time. You can enjoy it. And we moved on.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds amazing. William, now, again, many experiences to choose from. So what would be one of your favorites?
It will be walking. I mean, I can't remember which year, but we were walking between Kakuli and Inchenja. We were doing a transfer walk. I was with one of the guys, Sam Koma. He's an old buddy. I don't know where he is now. We were walking in the tall grass, and we passed some section, and some picked up some lion smell. I mean, the guys that spend most of the time in the bush, they can pick these things up. And he said, there might be some lions somewhere. Behind us, where we had just walked, there were 2 lions sleeping. So, I mean, just thinking that we walked past sleeping lions was unbelievable. I mean, that still stands out to this day.
There is also, yes, there's some incredible walking out there. And I mean, we all have so many stories to share, but that's amazing. Nick, how about you? Can you pick one?
Yeah, just on the Zambezi River, sun going down behind the hills, mosey in my hand, and swimming through the river to get to one of the islands, and you really see in elephants their love of life and playfulness when they get into the water, and they roll around. They just mess around and they have a laugh, and to see that is wonderful. Yeah, I think that's up there for me.
Well, I hear you. I think that is, again, what Dan just said to everyone, you know, the joy is having that time to be able to sit back and just enjoy those experiences rather than moving on to the next sighting, which I think is really, you know, something very special in Zambia, for example.
And you are?
Oh, me, gosh. Well, that's a really tough one. I have to say that when having obviously worked at Tongabezi and with Tongabezi in the olden days, more people used to camp on Livingston Island. And so it's one thing I did used to bug Ben about, because I was like, oh my God, all the people that used to work in Livingston and Zambia used to stay on Livingston Island. So I think one of mine was indeed having the privilege of well, we didn't camp, we just had a net over us. But the guys were so lovely that they set up a table for myself and Ben and Vanessa, where we had dinner on. But Ben actually also took me swimming in Devil's Pool at night by the full moon. So I think that was actually probably, I mean, there are lots on safari, but that was probably one of my scariest, but also most amazing highlights. Because during the day, there are the guides, you know, you've got all the guides there helping you. But when it's just you dipping into Devil's Pool, it's quite something different. But thanks, Dan. Thank you, guys. That's amazing. We've got quite a few questions, and I promise not to spend too much time talking, but we've shared hopefully some really interesting stories. So let me race through these questions We've touched upon some. Mira was asking about the passports and visas for US. As we said, there are no visas for quite a few nationalities. I believe, Danny, confirm that on the website, we have got a little section that shows which nationalities do still have to apply for a visa. But certainly for most of the EU, UK and the US, as well as various other countries, there is no visa. I do believe Switzerland does have a visa, and various others, but you can find that on the website. And if anyone else wants to add that.
Sorry, just to add to that, if you're looking for it on our website, it's under the information section on the tab.
Brilliant. Thank you. You touched upon fishing, Dan. We've had a question from Poldy saying, when is fishing season in the Lower Zambezi National Park? With a husband who's an avid fisherman, could you answer this question, please?
So the fishing ban starts in November and it ends in March. Yeah, 31st of March. So it's just because that's the breeding season for fishing. So they kind of do it to stop netting and other more for people that catch the fish to keep the fish. So, but you can fish inside of the parks, catch and release.
Brilliant, thank you. Nick, you mentioned the camp opened by African Parks in Lilwa. Do you know the name of it? Asked by Rob Same.
I think it's
I think I'm right in saying. Anyone in the office correct me on that? Lua Plains Camp, I think.
That's right. It is Lua Plain Camp.
Oh, no S. Lua Plain Camp. Oh.
Yeah.
And it's quite a bit more reasonably priced than King Luanica. We've been talking with Africa Parks the last couple of days about it, but it's a very nice. I haven't stayed there myself, but I know a couple of people that have, and they report very favourably about the camp itself. It's quite well located on the edge of the plain, and is very roughly thumbsuck about half the price of King Luanica. So it's a bit more reasonably priced.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got Marion, who will be coming back from Austria to Zambia, which is super exciting. She's coming in May this time, so she hasn't got a question as such, but she's really interesting to see the difference in the vegetation, having always come at the drier times. So we look forward to having you back in Zambia. We have got a question about the North Luangwa. How is the North Luangwa developing? Again, Marion and one or two others have asked about this, saying, you know, only been to the South Luangwa, but would be interesting to hear how it's different from the South Luangwa, i.e. North Luangwa, and if there are any developments, etc. up there.
more people going to, but not that many more.
It is still quite an out there destination. Remote Africa Safaris are the only high-end operator running camps there. They've run Mwaleshi Camp, which is a walking-only camp for quite a number of years now. There's only 3 rooms there. Last year, the year before, they opened Takwela, which is on the Luangwa, close to the confluence of the Mwaleshi and the Luangwa. That offers walking and driving. So it's not unrealistic to suggest that you might stay at both camps, have a couple of nights in each. But those are the 2 camps that we are sending people to in the North Luangwa. There's a couple of other more budget-oriented camps that we don't really use so much. But yeah, Remote Africa Safaris combine their South Luangwa camps with their North Luangwa camps and do so very well.
I had an amazing 3 nights at Mwaleshi where we followed elephants and Pride of Lion every single day a little bit further. So it was a really incredible experience up there.
And you might see rhino there, because Frankfurt Zoological, who are putting a lot of effort and money into conservation in that park, have been managing a very extensive rhino reintroduction program over many years now, and the rhinos they've dropped some of the fences now from the boma, and so yeah, when you're staying at Mwaleshi camp, it's quite common to see rhino sport. Less common to see the animals themselves, but they are there, and they are seen on occasion.
Thank you. Further question is about further north in Zambia with Lake Tanganyika. Are there any developments up there?
There's talk about flights going in there, but the biggest problem that we encounter when trying to get people up to that northern section is access. it's a long way. It's too far to drive for our type of clientele, and so that leaves you with very expensive charter flights. But there is talk of opening the region up with scheduled flights, so we'll watch this space. But really, at the moment, as far as Zambian Ground Handlers is concerned, it's more of a kind of self-drive destination that we don't really get involved with. But yeah, there's quite a lot going on up there.
Okie dokie. Just on the Kafue flight starting this year from Aarhus in Switzerland, where in the Kafue will they land?
The scheduled flights are going into Chunga, which is in the central part of the Kafue. Those are the scheduled flights, and then from Chunga you can get seat-in-plane rates or charter rates to elsewhere in the Kafue, either to the Busanga Plains up the top, or into the central section between the middle and the north, where you get the classic Zambia camps, Musketi.
Okay, thank you. We then have a question from Tamara, which we touched upon with Kasanka and Liwa. How easily accessible are the parks? It tends to be charter, doesn't it?
Kasanka and Liwa, yeah. There's no schedule or even seat-in-plane rates. Remote Africa, we're offering seat-in-plane rates to Kasanka and to Bangwelu. Liwa planes, there are seat-in-plane rates to Kalabo. I heard the other day they're planning on retarmacking Kalabo at great expense, but the strip on the Liwa plane next to King Luanika at Matamaneni is still not really operational, which is a great shame because it's quite a long drive from Kalabo onto the plane. So yeah.
Sorry, my telephone started ringing. Sorry. I will just keep going. One quick question about the wildlife density in the Kafue Park. We had one saying, what's it really like outside of Busanga Plains? It's very varied, isn't it?
Yeah, that central area. There's more and more being seen in the central area. The more tourism presence there is in any area, in any national park, the more wildlife will congregate, and there's more and more going on in the central part of the Kafue, and as a direct result, there is more game there, and the sightings are getting better. I mean, they're solid. It's a very big park, so there are areas that you can drive through and not see too much, but the areas around where most of the camps are, in the central and going up to the north, game's good.
And they've worked very hard at it over the years as well.
Yeah.
And then we had a lovely message from Mira, which is more a thank you, which is hi from Great Falls, Virginia. Come visit us. This was a very enjoyable and informative webinar. Thank you very much. So thank you very much from that, with lots of other thank yous. The last thing, just to round off, is really Zambia 60 years and Zambian Ground Handlers 15 years and the educational trip. Will one of you just want to say a little bit about that before we round off? And of course, if there are any other questions, you've got a couple more minutes to throw them in the Q&A. But I think it would be nice to sort of finish off. I also had one other question, which was more about if someone wanted to spend Zambia at Christmas, what would be a recommendation? So that's one question to deal with. And then the Zambian Ground Handlers educational trip for October, please. Anyone?
Sorry, you broke there.
I was throwing it into your court, Danny. That's your baby. Thank you.
Well, the October fam trip is centered around the 14th of October. So we've got quite a set number of itineraries that are kind of sandwiching the 14th. So there'll be pre and post. And on the 14th, it'll be like a mini trade show. So we'll have all of the camp owners and operators in attendance, and it'll be a little bit more informal. We'll have a presentation on how to sell Zambia, and then just like a nice cocktail evening, and everyone will stay at Cielo Resort. And then on the 15th, people will either finish their fam trip or carry on with their post fam trip. So we do have a number of set itineraries for that.
And we've still got some places available. So if you did want to register your interest, you can always drop us an email, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
It's going to be the biggest event in the Zambian calendar.
I was just about to say, it's a big year of celebrations, but this really is going to be the biggest.
Yeah, no, it is. We're targeting probably getting about 50 international tour operators visiting us over that period, and get all the camp owners and operators, as Danny says. So yeah, that day on the 14th when we all get together will be a big day. We'll make it very educational and informative, but also fun
and celebratory.
and celebratory.
Because we've got to toast the whole team. Because which is also the lovely thing about this, is indeed meeting everybody that you either work with or hopefully will work with face to face, and get to know everybody, including myself and Johan, who represents Zambian Ground Handlers in the States. And there will be various other celebrations throughout the. Sorry, Dan.
Sorry, I just wanted to say it's also a nice little teaser to see how we work. So.
Definitely,
nice
although you are putting a lot of pressure on that one. 50 itineraries matched around, that's quite massive, to be honest. Anyone wants to send us a group of 50, it's nothing now.
This is our group department.
Yes, no, I mean, you do a marvelous job, so it is lovely to have you both. So yes, and then just the last question was, if anyone did want to come to Zambia for Christmas, that was a question, where Bush Camp Company have got some camps open. Do we ever do those kind of itineraries? What would you recommend?
It's a beautiful month to travel in. All the camps in the central part of the Luangwa, the South Luangwa, are open. As you say, the Bush Camp Company have some remote camps that are still open until the early in the new year. Lower Zambezi, your options are slightly more limited. Central part of the Kafue is very open as well. Yeah, December's an exciting time. It's a beautiful time to come and be in the bush. Once you get into the proper rainy season, January, February, March, it becomes harder work. But December, lovely time to come. Lovely.
Brilliant. Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll do a little Christmas itinerary at some stage that we can follow up with. All right, guys, is there anything else that any of you would like to add just as we finish off? I think we are, sorry, I'll just do one. We've got Caribou from Toronto. How long is the fam trip? The fam trip is really a little bit dependent because it's little sections. So you could sort of do a 5-day plus you're trying to aim for 10 days plus, aren't you? So if anyone wanted to add on the Kafue, they could do that. But at worst, they could do 5 days plus the 14th, right?
Yeah. Anything from 5 days through to 2 or 3 weeks, however long you want to stay, we'll make a plan.
And it's very interchangeable. So if you'd rather do the Kafue and South Luangwa, that could be an option. If you'd rather just do the Kafue, if you'd rather just do Lower Zambezi. So it's really just personal preference.
Well, the personal preference from this lady is forever. So there we go. You can come and move to Zambia. I'm sure that the team will welcome you there. All right, guys. Well, thank you so very much for joining us today. I will be following up with a recording and some bits and pieces. But yes, from all of us, thanks so much for taking the time to be here. And hopefully we will see you in October for a celebration. But if not, we'll also see you at various shows as well. So lots of people saying thank yous, but I'm going to sign off now so that we can end today's webinar. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.